The group chat is ruining every relationship in our lives, and we are utterly bananas to let that happen. Yes, I'm wearing a monkey mask. No, it's not a fetish. I've got my reasons. I have a lifelong condition that YouTube won't even let me talk about. So for now, let's just say I'm certified bananas myself, which in a weird way makes me the perfect person to point out all the ways that you normal people live that I actually think are insane. So this is what's happening for me, and when I speak to people, it's the same for them that used to have like really close personal relationship with someone. You kind of mostly talk to them less on a one-to-one basis, and you talk to them more in groups, whether it's friend groups or whether it's the family group chat, the group chat at work with your colleagues. And I kind of think that this was happening anyway, but I think when lockdown came into place, it kind of accelerated all of that because we were trying to keep in contact with one another without being able to see each other face to face, and so we had way more of a digital presence, and that just kind of normalized these kind of interactions. We couldn't get together in social gatherings, so we had social gatherings in the group chat, online, on Zoom or calls, whatever. That's what we all did. And it's just kind of lasted since then. It's just kind of been this overhang. But the thing is, it's just completely changed the way that we interact with people. When was the last time anyone even phoned anyone? Like maybe you phoned your mum, or your gran. When's the last time you phoned your mate and had a good chat? We're not doing anything on a one-to-one basis anymore. We're just kind of communicating with people en masse. And so of course, we're going to be really concerned about how we look in front of the group as opposed to how we feel connected to that other individual. The way that you'll interact with someone in a group is completely different how you'll interact with them in a one-on-one basis. There's loads of kind of social dynamics that have been studied forever that have huge implications on that and who you are as a person, who they are as a person, and who you are kind of as part of the collective. So one of the classic ways that we interact with people in a group, as opposed to when we're working with people on an individual basis, is something called conformity. Now, what we do is that we tend to just agree with the group consensus and go along with it, essentially for an easier life or because of peer pressure or whatever, in ways that we wouldn't do normally. Now, you might be thinking, well, I don't think that's true, but there's actually been studies around this. There was a famous study where this kind of scientist took people into a room, to a classroom, and he drew 3 lines on a whiteboard. And when people looked at these lines, he said to them, okay, which ones are the most similar in length? It was a super simple question. You had A, B, C, A and B, almost exactly the same length. C's way different. Whoever was asked obviously answered accurately. A 5-year-old could answer the question. What he did then, which is interesting, is he repeated this experiment asking people these things, but this time around, he brought in 2 actors who had been told to deliberately give the wrong answer. He'd asked the 2 actors first. Actor 1 goes, oh, it's obviously C. Actor 2 goes, it's obviously C. And then he'd come to the person who wasn't an actor, and bizarrely, that person, even though it was a really, really simple answer, it was so obvious, would say, yes, it's C. This was repeated across many people, and it happened again and again and again. Because when we're in a group environment, we feel this sense, whether it's even just subconscious, to go along with people and go along with the majority. Now, another famous example, another way that group dynamics change who we are as people, is something called the bystander effect. You've probably heard about this. This is when, say you're out in the street and someone's getting mugged or something, you would be less inclined to step in because you see there's a group of people and we just sort of subconsciously think someone else would do that. We become a bystander to the event as opposed to kind of actively involved. We just kind of expect people around us to do something. Typically studied in emergency situations, but it happens in general. It happens in other situations. And I think where this gets interesting is if you think about your group chat situation, if you were sat down with a mate and that mate was going through a hard time, she's been a really good friend to you and she's kind of telling you about this partner, and he's displaying these kind of controlling behaviours, you'd be really worried and you'd feel like you would have to say something. If maybe got a friend who's drinking too much or anything kind of destructive, you would feel on a one-to-one basis, oh, I have a kind of personal responsibility to kind of intervene and be a good friend to this person. Weirdly, when you're in that group chat situation, even if you're still kind of noticing these signals, you're way more inclined to think, that's not my place to say anything, that's not my role in this position because someone else will handle it. And so we sort of are inclined to become less good friends. We're less inclined to kind of interfere or intervene and actually help our friends and support them in ways. So something else that we do in group dynamics that we don't do individually is something called normative social influence. And what that kind of means is we tend to play a role within a group. We tend to kind of fit together with friends or family in a way that kind of functions as a jigsaw. Like if you're the baby of the family, you'll probably find you're always the baby. Your mum still treats you like your baby, even though you're 30, and your siblings are only 3-4 years older than you, and you've kind of got cumulatively just as many important life experiences as them, they'll treat you like you're still the baby. And the reason why that is because when we're in group dynamics, we try and find a way to be useful to the group, whether that's being the really funny person, or whether that's being the really cynical person, or whether that's being the anxious person, whether that's being an aggressive kind of protector, whatever that kind of role is, that's the role that we play. So sometimes you might find in groups of friends There's one person that always gets the mick taken out of them, or maybe you sort of play the role where you downplay yourself a lot and you take the mick out of yourself a lot. And that's kind of this group dynamic at play, and it's a studied phenomenon. And so what it means is that we often end up being a different version of ourselves, acting to a certain degree, behaving like a different person. And it's just an evolutionary thing, because when we're functioning as a group, we're functioning as part of that team, but we almost can be limiting ourselves or limiting other people in order to kind of fulfill that role, which is just a really different way of thinking about it. And another kind of well-studied area is something called social polarization. What you consider normal is no longer set by yourself when you're functioning within that group dynamic. It's kind of set by the group, or at least influenced by the group. There were some scientists, one of them was called Ginsberg. What they did is they kind of had, again, using actors and normal people. They had a normal person come along asking to play blackjack and kind of set what that person thought was a normal amount to bet. So say that person went along and was betting a fiver on each hand, who's just betting a fiver. What they would then do is send in two actors who'd be betting on their own individual blackjack hands. In blackjack, you get dealt your own hand, you're not betting against anyone else but the table, you're not betting against your fellow players. And one actor goes in and he goes, right, I'm going to bet £10 on this hand, and the other actor bets £10 on this hand. And over time, the person whose kind of natural limit for betting was £5 starts to just bet £10. They're just influenced from, whether you want to call it peer pressure or whatever. They readjust what they consider the normal amount to bet to be £10, to be more aggressive, to be a bigger gambler, bigger better, whatever you want to call it. They repeated this example with sending two actors who, instead of betting £5, would only bet, say, £1. So then, of course, the person who'd been betting £5 each time suddenly thinks, oh no, I've been too aggressive. They start spending £1 on a bet each time. If £5 is kind of their middle ground, if the people around them are way more conservative and only bet £1, they become more conservative about those people. If the people around them are way more aggressive and start betting £10, they become way more aggressive themselves. And so what we consider normal is heavily influenced by the group in which we're functioning in. I think probably the one that everyone knows about social dynamics is the one called de-individuation, which is really hard to say. And what de-individuation is when in a group, you kind of have less self-awareness or sort of less sense of responsibility. You find this when people are rioting. A normally kind of well-behaved person will see people rioting around them and will almost lose that sense of self and sense of order and just kind of join in events or do things more extreme than they would ever do. Or like if you go to a concert or a football game, you could be a really shy person and suddenly you're jumping up and down and you're shouting, you're a really vocal person, you're a really energetic person. And that's just because within that group, you've almost lost that sense of self somewhat and feel able to act in ways that aren't kind of normal to you, but feel more normal in that situation. The context of the group resets who you are and takes away that kind of sense of self and sense of self-responsibility. And there's also something called the Ringelmann effect, or, well, people also call it social relation, which I think is just a way better way of describing it, in a very funny way of describing it. And what that means is when you're functioning in a group, because you feel less visible, you sort of become a more low-effort person. You just sort of do it subconsciously. And this has been measured across lots of different examples. They ask someone to put on a rope at their maximum effort. And so this person's put on this rope at their maximum effort, and they record the amount of movement and the amount of weight they're pulling and the amount of exertion. And then they repeated this example where a person is pulling it alongside a number of people in a group. Each of those participants in the group, their exertion levels drops. So they've repeated the same example with asking people to shout as loud as they can, measuring how high the decibels go. And so people's ability to pull the rope or to shout louder hasn't decreased. It's just because they feel less self-responsibility in order to pull the rope or to shout or scream. What they do instead is just reduce their effort. They just become lower effort people. They call it, it's social loafing. They're loafing about. They're performing to a lesser degree. Now imagine that the only way you're predominantly interacting with your friends is through these groups, right? These WhatsApp groups. What that means is that people that you kind of had a lot in common with, you're kind of giving them, like we talked about, a low effort version of yourself who's less inclined to kind of know their own mind and who's less likely to be a good friend. They're less likely to intervene. They're more likely to kind of drift to one opinion, or like more extreme opinion or aggressive opinion, or one more conservative. So we sort of just become different versions of ourselves, less probably not the people that you became friends with in the first place, weirdly. So that's the first problem. The first problem is that we don't really act like ourselves when we're within these group dynamics. I think the second problem is that there's a constant kind of stream of conversation. When you're interacting with someone on a one-on-one basis, maybe they send you a message and you're jumping on a flight, or you're going into a meeting, or you're just going to sleep. You own half of the rhythm of that conversation. You own half of the pace. So you might not be able to respond in that moment. And so until you do respond, the conversation kind of stops, right? Which allows you to dictate it to be sort of comfortable for yourself. When you're interacting with people in these group chats, it's the opposite of that. Someone sends a message and you've got an early night. You could wake up to this whole stream of messages the next morning. You almost get this sense of FOMO, the fear of missing out, because the conversation continues without you. And there's almost this kind of assumed consent to things where, someone goes in the group chat and says, hey, should we all get together soon? Should we do something? Should we go for drinks? Or should we do whatever? And then you've missed out on that conversation. And next time you've looked at the phone, you was only away for a couple of hours or whatever. And suddenly you're kind of committed to these plans that, I don't know, maybe it's a mate that always wants to, organise some big, expensive, like, oh no, we should all go do a weekend away somewhere. And you just think, mate, I ain't got the money. Please always, stop doing these really expensive things. Isn't there a way we can hang out without me having to go into my overdraft? Maybe it's like that mate lives in the middle of nowhere and somehow all the plans always end up centering around, you've got to go to their gaff, it's a right ag. But that's what you always end up getting committed to because you've missed it or whatever. And so you kind of get this weird social anxiety that develops of needing to be constantly present and monitoring the group chat because it sort of dictates the rhythm of your interactions and the nature of your relationships and friendships with people or family, whether it's Christmas plans or whatever your family organising. You sort of feel like once that consensus moves, and like we talked about, that people will in those group dynamics just go with the consensus, you can't really become the outlier. So if you miss that conversation at the end, you try to object and try to come up with different plans, you can't do it anymore because that group dynamic will always side against you, whether you're in the right or wrong, really. It does. It creates a kind of social anxiety of feeling like you need to be constantly on and constantly present with the group chat in a way that you didn't need to be with one-on-one conversations where you were able to dictate more of the pace and the reciprocity of the conversation. Now, weirdly, I think that just actually creates so many more problems because you're constantly available and because you have this FOMO of if you don't respond, the conversation just moves beyond you and you miss out. You sort of then start answering at times that probably aren't the best time to respond to people or to kind of converse with people. You've just come home from work, you're really tired. You still jump on the group chat, you're kind of responding, or you've gone out, you've got a bit drunk or whatever. You just start responding at the worst times. And I think that's why you see in these kind of group chats, the classic kind of situation of someone flaming out and kind of going on a rant and then suddenly going, right, I've had it, I'm off, I'm leaving the group chat. Or you get these other situations where you get these kind of fractured groups where there's another group that spends a lot of time talking about the other group, about how annoying someone else is in the other group. You even get groups where they can become quite toxic, where there's banter, everyone's bants. It's quite loaded banter, and you probably think, actually, these people just aren't very nice to each other, or these people are really kind of jealous or envious with one another, or these people are really competitive. And it sort of becomes this kind of toxic mess because you're not necessarily being civil with each other. You're becoming over familiar. You're you almost create the environment of a prison, this social prison. When you go on holiday or something, you see these kind of miserable couples that have been together forever. They won't break up because there's just no way it works out, whether they've got the kids or financials or whatever it is. They're kind of stuck together, but it's just got to the point where there is constant point scoring and there is this kind of constant over familiarity where they say things to one another with these barbs that they would never say to anyone else because they'd have a kind of politeness or whatever. But that's all disappeared, that civility's all disappeared. And some group chats kind of end up being like that. Sometimes when you're in the family group chat, that is a terrible idea. When you think about getting together at Christmas with your family, for Christmas Day it's fine, whatever, but by the time the Queen's speech is on, someone is definitely doing your nutting. They just are. No matter how much of a perfect person you are, definitely that aunt or that uncle or your brother or whoever is doing your nutting, right? And you think, thank God, I can't wait to Boxing Day and I'll do one. But if you kind of get stuck there, if you're one of those people that you have to kind of travel down to your parents, your grandparents or whatever, and you get stuck there for a number of days, by the last day, you're just holding on to that last nerve. And the group chat is just doing that every day for the rest of your life. It's just a terrible, terrible idea. And sort of speaking about over-familiarity, I think this is the worst thing that the group chat does, is it means because there's this constant stream and this kind of drum roll, and a drum beat rather, of information from people. When you do get together with people, we'll go to the pub, lads, let's all go to the pub. You go to the pub, no one's got anything to say. You go, you right, Kev, how's it going, Kev? Yeah, it's all right, I got a new job. Oh yeah, I know that, it's at the builder's yard down the road, isn't it? Yeah, I know, you told me on the WhatsApp group. Yeah, Yeah, my boss, he's all right, actually. Yeah, he used to play for so... Yeah, I know, Kev, you told me, on the WhatsApp group. How you doing, Mike? Yeah, me and so-and-so are getting married. Oh, yeah, I saw that on the WhatsApp group. You know, it's just that, isn't it? You just get to a point where, on the WhatsApp group, as it were, you're not really having in-depth conversations. You're just kind of getting these pithy sort of back and forths. But then by the time you get together, rather than someone kind of giving you some great news, or they've got engaged, or they've got a new job, or whatever, you don't get into the depths of it because it's old news. We've sort of kind of narrativized our lives so much that we're giving constant news bulletins to one another without really thinking about what our actual roles are in each other's lives, which is to kind of love and support one another. You know, when you tell a mate, you know, you've lost your job, it's not like a declaration to the London Stock Exchange for investors and shareholders. You're telling your mate you've lost your job because you're hoping they'll be able to sort of sit you down, calm you down, tell you it'll be all right, help you do a plan or whatever, right? But you don't really get that. You just go on the WhatsApp group, oh, I've lost my job, and they go, oh, sorry, mate, yeah, sorry to hear that, let us know if you need anything. And then it just kind of moves on because you can't have in-depth conversation and kind of these limited WhatsApp messages. And so we've sort of lost this genuine kind of connection and simplified it in a way that's not helpful. I think that we've almost gamified communication where we're not actually communicating to communicate or kind of engage with one another. We're doing these kind of big groups where you say something and all you're really looking to do is get a like of it, like a digital scoreboard that's going on. You wouldn't do that if it was just you and one other person. You'd send them a message to say something back, but you're kind of communicating. But when you're sort of doing it in front of other people, there is a performance to it. It's like, oh, I'm the WhatsApp group joker. I'm the group, you know, when it comes to the group chat, he's the king of the memes. You're almost doing that just to kind of self-promote yourself. You're doing it out of a sense of duty, out of a sense of trying to be the best, as opposed to any kind of genuine communication. It's become like this notice board of kind of smugness in some ways. It's really bizarre. But yeah, I've had that situation where you're literally in the pub. Everyone's on their phones. Your phone beeps and you think, oh, right, okay. You know, can't beat them, might as well join in. So you pick up your phone, you look at it. Someone's literally sending memes to the group chat as the group chat are there in person. And they're like, oh, you look up and you think, I'm sat opposite you. Talk to me. Why? It's just weird. And I think the group chat has become like this just gluey blob of friendship. We've almost taken 5 good relationships and kind of smushed them together instead of having a genuine kind of connection or insight or support or love for one another. We've kind of just got this sort of collection of surface level connections that are somehow built on weird social status and affirmations. You know, I'm in so many group chats with, whether it's the work one, the family one, with this group, with the group of people you went to school with, or the group of people that worked at your old job, or the group of people you play five-a-side with, or different kind of collections of people. Like, we're collecting each other like Pokemon, but we've never felt more lonely. Like, we've never been more connected with one another, and yet never has loneliness been more of an epidemic. We've almost sort of lost sight of what relationships are even meant to be. We're meant to be there to kind of provide each other companionship as we kind of traverse through this human condition, through life. We're meant to be there to support one another and feel genuinely seen in our best moments or our worst moments, or when we feel vulnerable. We've sort of just traded it all in for kind of modern tech's ability and ease to be connected with vast amounts of people at a very surface level. And that's fantastic, but we never really asked what we had to give up to get that, what we gave up and traded for that convenience. I kind of feel like we'd be better off just having a smaller group of people that require more effort and that we interact with on more of a one-to-one basis, but they're just a way higher quality and of way more fulfilling for us in our day-to-day lives. I guess that all I'm saying is maybe try and think about how you're interacting with and valuing the people in your life that really do matter to you. Are you making the time for those genuine quality connections? Or have you kind of got wrapped up in this sense of being available, but never actually really given over yourself to that relationship or that friendship in a way that's meaningful? But hey, what do I know? I'm just a man on the internet in a monkey mask. Either way, I'll see you next time when we look at another completely normal thing, which in fact, when you think about it, is utterly bananas.